I am your host, Stassi Schroeder. Welcome to Tell Me Lies, the official podcast. What's the most unhinged thing of season 3?
Steven, because he's so evil.
I do think he is misunderstood.
You see everyone face consequences.
It's intoxicating. The writers just know how to trick you. There's always a twist in this show.
It's nothing you would expect.
Tell Me Lies, the official podcast, now streaming, and stream the new season of Tell Me Lies on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Hey Mama, thanks for making all my favorite recipes.
Hi Ma, thanks for your unfiltered advice.
Hi Mom, thanks for always being by the phone.
Hey Mom, happy Mother's Day.
When you ship UPS Air at the UPS Store, your items arrive on time or your money back. Guaranteed at no extra cost. Exclusively at the UPS Store U.S. retail locations. Visit theupsstore.com/airshipping for full details. Terms and conditions apply. Send your Mother's Day gifts at the UPS Store and we'll get your gratitude there on time.
This episode of Haway, the podcast, is brought to you in association with Saley. Now, before Chris gets started with today's Q&A episode, me and Gav wanted to jump in here and tell you all about Saley, because this is absolutely perfect if you're planning on going overseas on your summer holidays this year, or as Gav likes to do, just go on holiday any time of the year.
Yeah, well, you got to get the sun on your skin, haven't you? And you've got to make sure that when you're there, that you've got plenty of data on your phone, because especially what we do, I'm still grafting even though I'm on holiday, putting things in for the podcast and the website and stuff. So I need me data, and it can be tricky when it comes to data roaming because it costs through your nose. And on top of that, of course, guess Wi-Fi is not the most secure and it's not the most reliable. It drops in and out depending on where you are in a hotel. So you need something fairly reliable.
You do. So this is how Saley works. It works absolutely spot on in more than 200 destinations. And it absolutely saves you from getting hit with those massive bills when you come back. And you always get a shock, don't you, when you come back and you get your phone bill emailed over to you and you've spent hundreds of pounds more than you thought you would. And it also means even if you are used to going to pick up a local SIM at an airport, you don't have to queue. You're ready to set up. You're ready to rock and roll, really. And it's dead simple to work, isn't it, Gav?
It is indeed. You just head over to either the iOS or Android App Store. If you've got a phone that supports eSIMs, download the Saley app and then follow the instructions on how to set it up. And of course, we've negotiated a code, which helps people get a little bit of discount too.
We certainly have. So once you go through that process, you download the app from the app store of your choice. You select the package that you want and make sure that you put in the discount code Haway. Put in that code, you'll get 15% off your first purchase. And what's not to love, Gav?
That's it, yeah. Make sure you've got a good connection that's not going to cost the earth this summer.
And for more details, you can go to saley.com/Haway. And remember to add in the discount code of Haway to get 15% off. That's Saley, SAILY. And of course, all of the details can be found in the show notes for today's show. Right, we'll hand over to Chris. I think he's got Andrew and Jonny with him today for today's Q&A. And there's plenty to talk about, so on with the show.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to Haway the podcast. And as much as we didn't fancy looking back to Friday night too much, we thought we'd jump on and record a Q&A with the questions that you lovely people have sent in once again, because it's not really surprising that they are mostly about what happened last Friday evening. But there are some crackers in there, so we should crack on and introduce our crack team to answer them. Because first up, I have Jonny Hawley. Hello, Jonny.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, I think maybe that should be the only mention we make of Friday night, by the way.
Really?
Should we move on shortly? Yeah, I thought that this might be the sadomasochism hour on Haway the podcast. So, anyway, I'm still excited to get into it. I'll kid myself.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you just keep telling yourself that. Once we get past the first, 20 questions, there's a couple on general stuff, so we're all right. But also joining us today, we have someone who has seen his fair share of Sunderland games that have gone in that direction, because we have Andrew Smithson with us. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, mate. I'm looking forward to having the crack with you and cracking on about Friday and where it leads us.
Excellent. Nobody clicked on there, but anyway, cracking. I should have done it around Easter, really. It's a bit too late for that sort of stuff.
No.
I'm too used to sitting around a table with my kids and getting them to shake their heads and go, oh, God, proper dad joke. But anyway, let's get straight into it because, Jonny, I'll come to you. And predictably, it's about Forest. We've got one from Steve Richards. It's very apt for what we're doing because he says, is it safe to come out yet? If it is, can I ask, how long did it take you to get over last Friday? And what did you do as a coping strategy?
Starting with the easy questions. Yeah, I mean, it was a weird one, wasn't it? The game on Friday, because obviously we've lost 5-0. It's a bit of in isolation in terms of a one game, it's a bit of a disaster, isn't it? I mean, apologies to Mark Pugash for using the word disaster in relation to football. I mean, I'm sure he'll be booting off somewhere, but no, it was so bad so quickly that it just circled immediately round to, I was just in disbelief. I was like laughing. Do you know what I mean? When you're watching some of them goals go in. So in a weird way, I was almost over it before the game finished because it all went so spectacularly wrong in such bizarre fashion by what was it? By about the 35th minute, I think we were 4-0 down. So I'd already accepted we were going to lose the game before half time even came around, which obviously you're not normally in that position. In terms of coping strategies, a bit of venting in a few group chats on Friday night to try and expel some of that negative energy. And then I went out on the drink all day on Saturday in Sheffield. So watched some snooker, spent some time around the Crucible and just tried to forget that football was a sport that existed for a couple of days. Newcastle's result helped soothe the pain a little bit, but otherwise it's just been trying to, I think, to make a semi-serious point, doing the kind of thing that I would hope the squad have been doing in terms of just forget about it as much as you can, get away from it a little bit, think about someone else for a while, and then come back and just move on and try and focus all your energy on the Wolves game next weekend. But yeah, I'm making it sound really easy there. If you'd had a chat with us on Friday night, you wouldn't have had such a level-headed conversation, maybe, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, Jonny says that he thought at halftime it was over, and we got a question by email from Lewis Pert, who said, this might sound daft, but did anyone have a little belief that we might be able to turn it around against Nottingham Forest? He says, I'm not sure if I was disappointed or angry with the first half because of how optimistic I was before the match. I didn't want to leave early, and I didn't, in case we got a couple of early second half goals because we could have got a point. This is how this Sunderland team over the last couple of years have made me feel that they can come back against anyone. And there was a bit of belief. And there was, as we talked, I think, in the aftermath of the game, there was an incident very late in the first half with Xhaka going down in the box, which I couldn't understand why VAR didn't look back at it. I mean, it was a bit like the Enzo Lafay incident against Bournemouth. And then, of course, you had the Dan Ballard disallowed goal. So there were a couple of opportunities that we could have provided a bit more hope in that game, wasn't there?
There was, and if anybody would believe that Sunderland could come back from 4-0, it's me. I mean, people would look at me and think, oh, you must be away with the fairies. But I've always been like that. I think it was only in the last 10 minutes when I turned around to the kids and says, I take a point now. It was such a bizarre first half that yeah, there was a little bit of me thinking, all it takes is one or two goals and let's get the momentum going. We've shown great mental strength in the season to come to respond well to knockbacks. And am I right in thinking that in terms of statistics and what have you, it wasn't really a 4-0 first half. It was almost as if just Forest had this streak where for 5 minutes they couldn't not score goals.
Well, there was a statistic around the hour mark, I think, where they had 5 shots on target and scored 4 goals.
Yeah. So yeah. It is always hard when you're that far behind because the defending team can afford to just break things up and just hold you at arm's length. But there was a period where you thought, you never know. Sunderland are a daft club where all sorts of crazy things happen. So if any era of Sunderland team was going to pull off something like that, this was the team. But then, reality hits you again, and it's not Roy of the Rovers we're watching. It's Premier League football, and you're going to be hard pushed to find a team that are going to blow a situation like that. And Forest did handle it well, I think, to be fair to them.
Yeah, and reality doesn't just hit you; it slaps you around the face multiple times, doesn't it? Just quickly, Andrew, before I leave that, just one that popped into my head. What for you is the best comeback you've seen Sunderland do in the flesh when you've actually witnessed it? So not kind of back in the day when we came back from, I don't know, 5-0 down or something back in the 1920s or something. Something you've seen.
We may have spoken about it. I think you were at this game. Were we 2-0 down at West Brom in the 105-point promotion season? I think we came from behind to win that, and that was good because it was a good team we were playing.
Didn't we have 10 men? Mickey Gray got sent off.
That was a few months before in the previous season, but that was also a game that we came from behind. I think that might have been a draw, but again, that was another come from behind win. It's rare in Sunderland history, and this season it's been quite noticeable that we have got so many points having gone behind, but it's usually only from 1-0 down. It's very rare that we've managed to pull back that sort of deficit.
Yeah. Well, answers on a postcard. Get in touch with us. Haway the podcast if you have witnessed a good Sunderland comeback, because our minds have gone blank right now. But going back to that Forest game, Jonny, Mackenbauer, he's asking maybe why this happened, because he said, was the Forest game a result of us having a strong 12 or 13 players who have been flogged to death over the season without the luxury of having quality players on the bench to rotate? Does this highlight the need for another very strong window to cement our place in the top half of the table?
I think it definitely helps to highlight the fact that we do still need a lot of work doing to the squad, and that was always going to be the case. Obviously, if we got relegated, we'd have needed a lot of work done to the squad, but no matter whether we, scraped 17th on the final day or finished 14th, 13th, or even if we go on and manage to kick on the last few games and get into the top half, we were always going to need still quite a lot of, not necessarily quite a lot of turnover. It's not that I think we need to get rid of a lot of players, but we were going to need strengthening again, because we all waxed lyrical, didn't we, over the summer and the sort of first couple of months of the season about how impressive it was that we'd managed to buy a new team, basically, and get them working together so quickly. But that was kind of the point, right? We bought the team, we bought the starting 11, in effect. We now need to build the squad so that we've got not just one or maybe two options in a position that are right up at that, required level, but so that we've got two, and then ideally sometimes even three players in each position. You look at the better teams in this league, and that's what they've got. Arsenal have been the case study for this all season. One of their biggest strengths in the title race has been the depth that they've had in the squad. Maybe not so much the mentality, but certainly the depth. And even Forest, right? Look, I was fuming on Friday night. I'm not going to gloss over it. As much as I urge restraint from the rest of the fan base, I'm as much of a hypocrite as everyone else is at times as a football fan. I was absolutely losing me rag in that first half, because I thought that to sort of give the second half of this opinion, like, yes, it shows we need to strengthen. We always needed to. And Forest were a good example where it was a humbling defeat because they're technically battling relegation. But at the same time, that's an expensive squad with a lot of quality players in it. And, Chris Wood up front, Morgan Gibbs-White in midfield. You can go through the list of players. They're a good team. But I think it's a little bit too glass half full to suggest that performance was solely down to fatigue or playing too many games. There were some pretty basic mistakes made there. Obviously, the highlight of those was probably the Roofs giveaway that led to, I think, the second goal, but also the third goal. I mean, not to relitigate the game, but there were three separate instances of just shocking or non-existent marking. The short ball that's played from the corner, non-marking at the back post, non-marking in the middle of the box. okay, fatigue can play a part in this because your decision making suffers and you're not as fresh and you're not getting about the pitch as well, maybe. But I just think there was a bit of naivety. I think there was a little bit of not even so much laziness or not physical laziness, but almost mental laziness, a bit of switching off. And it became a bit of a perfect storm, didn't it? We made uncharacteristic mistakes. Forest were unbelievably clinical, and every fine margin that could have gone against us kind of did. You mentioned the disallowed goal. You mentioned the Xhaka sort of non-penalty shout and those kind of
that
things.
was weird. I thought it was weird. The commentators didn't even go back. They didn't show a replay. VAR didn't have a look. And I thought, actually, at first glance, I thought it was a nailed-on penalty.
It felt like one of those days, didn't it, where the energy was just, Sunderland have lost this. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you see it sometimes, when referees will blow the whistle without even giving any stoppage time if a team's sort of 5 or 6-0 down. It's almost like a mercy rule. It sort of felt like most of the game was played in that spirit, which,
the ref was like,
yeah, like, let's just get it over with as soon as possible.
Bless them.
But yeah, like I say, I think I don't want to dig the players out too much because they've been brilliant all season, but I do think they let themselves down at times on Friday night. And that's why I was so disappointed, because there are games where the fatigue has caught up with us. There are games where other teams have just been lots better than us. That didn't feel like one of those games. It felt like we were as complicit in our own demises as anybody else. So yes, it definitely does highlight the need for some strengthening, but also this is one of the performances that I think criticism is more than warranted.
Yeah. Well, again, building off that, because we got one from Joel Lewins, Andrew, and he says the 5-0 loss was a wake-up call, and Regis Labris was correct in highlighting that we need to be 100% on it. We now have the last few games, so we should play, if fit, actual wingers, Talbi, Traore and Gulo, and move Enzo Lafay centrally, and the defence was a blip and will sort itself. So, I mean, he's absolutely right, I think, with the first point, because Regis Labris has been saying this, that with a club at the level we're at coming into the Premier League, every game we've got to be 100% on it to stand a chance, and that's the minimum. But then he's talked about the tactics, and I'm going to bring kind of Chris Rigg into the equation there, because he's talking about playing wingers, and also maybe Diarra, because he's talking about moving Enzo Lafay into the middle.
I've always been more than happy with Lafay on the wing, but yeah, I am coming round to this idea that he needs to be more central. A few people are saying that, so I'm not trying to pass that off as my own tactical brilliance that I've come up with that. It's been a talking point for a while. I think who's played on the wings recently, though, has been Labris has had his hands tied somewhat. It's pleasing now to read that Angulo and maybe I think it's Traore's been back on the training ground. I think that does give us options that we haven't had recently. That has impacted the lineup. And yeah, a bit more pace out wide could be a good thing for us. Wake up call, Joe Lewins referred to it as, yeah, perhaps it was a bit of that. I mean, Labris will have been stung by that, because we always talk about how Labris changes Sunderland's style to suit the opposition and target their weaknesses. Well, that's what's happened to him this time. Not just him, it's happened to the whole team. Because Forest were clearly very aware that we like to play it at the back, because they were pushed up really high. I think having Chris Woods back helps them. If you're down the bottom and you're struggling, he's an ideal front man for you.
Chris Woods was a goalkeeper for Sheffield Wednesday in England, isn't he?
What fast? Who am I on about? Chris Wood. I do. Listen, if we're conceding 5 goals for Chris Wood, that is a wake-up call. That is a serious problem. No, fair point. I'm glad. Chris Wood, I think it's been a big miss for them, and having him back was a factor. They also clocked on to the fact that set pieces at the moment we're defending them. We've got plenty of bodies back, but they all seem to be within the width of the goalposts. Every corner, every cross was deliberately overhit. And then there was a knockback or a header down and knock across the goal, and they were then getting to the second ball. I think that was deliberate. So yeah, Forest, give them their credit, must have really done their research on us and come up with a suitable plan. Even then, I don't think they could have, in their wildest dreams, thought it would have been that effective. But yeah, wake up call. I can fully understand that. We're lucky in that it was a heavy defeat, but really, in the grand scheme of things, it hasn't cost us that much. It's not like we've fallen loads of places down the table or anything like that. So if we can respond to it well, happy days. If there's a bit of fresh, a few fresh legs we can bring onto the wings, that's something we need to look at. And if Chris Woods is available in the summer, maybe we'll sign him and we'll play him up front next year, and he'll spearhead us to further up the table.
Yeah. Well, Chris Woods was actually on the bench for Sunderland, our last ever game at Roker Park, wasn't he, against Liverpool? And
didn't he play?
I remember David Priest being in goal.
David Priest played.
Chris Woods might have got on. They might have changed the keepers around. I can't remember. I remember Chris Woods being on the bench when Bobby Saxton got sick and started booting balls into the crowd because he was sick of the crowds nicking the balls when they went into the crowd. But anyway, just on that theme, Jonny, because we've got one from Chris Day, because he's asking, do we panic shipping so many goals as we have in the last two games? Villa and Forest were both as clinical as it gets. Forest pressed better than anyone I've seen this season, causing mistakes and punishing us every time. Is this a freaky blip, or does 9 in 2 games suggest something else? There is this thing that Martin hinted at, actually, Jonny, on this front, that he almost hinted earlier in the week in the response to the Forest game that we might have almost masked what happened at Aston Villa because of what we did later on. The fact that we conceded, we went way behind, and actually, if Villa had gotten another one, at some point it could have been 4-1, and then who knows what might have happened at that. But we did get a couple of goals, and it looked close, and because of the Diarra miss, everything else seemed to get lost in what happened in that moment. But what do you feel about the current kind of shipping in goal situation?
I think Villa you could write off as a blip, not just because we scored the goals and almost got a result. Obviously, you're right, and Martin's right. That does help in the sort of public consciousness after a game. If you've put an effort in like that, you're not going to get the same harsh judgment as you would if it had been 4-0. We'd been having some different conversations. But against Villa, it felt less self-inflicted, and that's not to say that we didn't make mistakes, which we did. And as much as I absolutely love him to pieces, Luke O'Nien did not have his best game in a Sunderland shirt at Villa Park. But he's also not part of our first choice defence when everybody's fit. So I find those much easier to explain away if you're in a sort of charitable mood and you're wanting to do that. Because
So you're saying very quickly, you're saying that Villa was more Villa being Villa and Forest was more about us.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because the Villa game, they were unbelievably clinical, and I can't remember which goal it was, but whatever the goal is where O'Nien ends up sort of, swan diving backwards trying to head the ball, that looks dreadful when you see it go in. But really, all that's happened is he's lost Watkins for half a yard, half a second, and then that movement is good enough to cause the goal. And the delivery's good and everything else. Villa were exceptional going forward. Like I say, the Forest game, Roof's just giving it away under essentially no pressure. Alderete did the same a few times. Now, you can look at it on the one hand and say, well, these are things that have happened at points all season. Like Alderete's been Cruyff turning on the edge of his own box and, doing mad things in mad places on the pitch and getting away with it quite a lot, so we all love it. So it would be hypocritical to start slagging it off when it doesn't work, but there's a line, isn't there, between you've tried something that's not come off and, at points there were brainless decisions being made by players who we know are much better than that, which it's a sort of strange catch-22, isn't it? Like, you only get so annoyed at them because you know they're so good. Like, if they were worse at football, you probably wouldn't be as irritated because you just expect it. But that's, as I said before, and why I think that we could maybe start discussing this as less of a blip, is it was pretty clear what was going wrong after the second goal went in. You mentioned the press, that Forest press, and they were very, very good, by the way. This is not to take away from Forest, who I thought performed really well on the night. But we could see that was happening. They'd clearly identified, like, Sunderland aren't fancying it with the ball at the back here. And again, like, not to dig him out, but I think they started targeting Alderete as well, because the way they were pressing, they were almost funneling the ball towards his side every time because they knew we were struggling to get out. And once it becomes a pattern, we should be able to identify it. And whether it's the players or the manager, somebody should be able to do something, whether it's, as simple as the players on the pitch going, lads, let's drop 5 here. Let's get it long a couple of times instead of playing short, just to, break out of this press, give them something different to think about. And we didn't do that. And that's why it's a concern. But it's only a couple of games. We could be coming away from Wolves this weekend and, we might have won 3 or 4-0 and we've kept a clean sheet and everybody's happy again and we're all back on the right track. And I hope that's what happens. And at that point, you can probably wave this away as a blip. If it continues, I think some bigger questions do need to start being asked.
Well, I think that's a good time for us to take a quick break. And I do promise in the second half we'll try and move away from Friday night. We will try our best. But anyway, we'll be back in a few minutes. And welcome back to Haway the podcast. And we'll carry on in that theme of that the kind of defensive structure and how we're conceding goals, Andrew, because the next one is from John Harrison. And he asks, what is behind the lack of improvement in set pieces? The lack of threat in an attacking sense is minging, and we struggle badly with crosses into the box. 3 of the first 4 goals on Friday came from simple balls into the box. Is it structural? Or is it personnel? And there was stats earlier in the season that we were up there as the worst in terms of scoring goals from corners, directly from corners. And it's bizarre, isn't it? Because we went through that period with Tony Mowbray where we didn't score from a corner for an age. And then Regis Lebris, you kind of got a bit better. And then, of course, the whole Enzo Lefebvre crossing it and Dan Ballard doing his thing against Coventry. So it was almost built on kind of scoring goals from set pieces. And then we started the season with a bang, I think, scoring a couple straight off the bat. And I think Alderete got one at Forest. I think Ballard got one against West Ham. So we kind of came out the blocks. And since then, I don't know that the set pieces have just kind of disappeared. And you hear all these things now, with set piece coaches coming on and celebrating as much as the players. I'm fully expecting one set piece coach to run on the pitch like Bob Stokoe when they get to score a goal from a set piece and start celebrating with the players. But what's your feelings on that?
Well, it was lovely use of the word minging. Was the fella asking the question? I think it was called John.
Yes, and when you dictate into Microsoft Word, it stars it out just as a aside.
Oh, does it?
Yeah,
oh,
doesn't like it.
Well, I like it, and John, I'm all for that. Yeah, you're right. It was something that we were particularly good at. Long throw-ins as well was a bit of a weapon for us at the start of the season. And I kind of got the feeling against Forest it was almost a token gesture. We were winding up for those big throw-ins and that they weren't really making a dent on Forest's defensive line. I don't think it's personnel. I think we've got people there who are perfectly capable in the air, Dan Ballard, Alderete, Mukiele, just to name 3 straight away, are big, strong lads. Roofs, I'm not too concerned with him with high balls into the box. I don't know if it's a little bit of something's got into their heads. They have conceded a few goals from set pieces, and that just ratchet up the pressure, and there's a almost element of panic there. I think the whole mood changes when we concede in a set piece because fans and players alike know, oh, bloody hell, teams are targeting us here. So, no, it's not personnel. Perhaps just a little bit more work on the training ground. Not that they're not working hard on the training ground, but it's an area of football that you can plan for and prepare for. And as for attacking set pieces, maybe we were too good in the first few games and teams have wised up to it. And yeah, maybe we need to just try a few new ideas, see if they pay off. Like Johnny said though, these aren't horrific issues, and it's not beyond possibility that after playing Wolves, things are looking bright again, and we're all saying, "Hey, everything's flying, and we're up and running."
Yeah. We say that after every defeat, don't we?
Yeah.
Just wait till the next one; it'll all change. But I'm going to throw two at you, Johnny, because I think that one of the questions was structural or personnel around set pieces. But I'm going to throw two questions at you because they're essentially around formations and what we're playing. First one's from Billy Blythe, and he says, could we look at three at the back? We've got a few options of Gertruida. Just as a side as well, if you dictate Gertruida as well, it comes out as Great Chowder. Just thought I'd mention that. A few options of Gertruida, O'Nien, Hume, Ronaldo being one of the three in there. Talby and Nordy wing backs and allow us to bring someone in to play alongside Robbie. Could also have Ronaldo, Hume, and possibly Diarra as wing backs. We have options all over. Then Mang the Ram asks, is there any chance of a 5-2-2-1 formation? It could be useful right now. Michele, Gertruida, Ballard, Alderete, and Ronaldo. Xhaka and Siddiqui in midfield, then Enzo, Lafayette, Diarra ahead of them, and Robbie or Isidore up top. Solidifies the league in defence and gets Enzo a little more central and gives Michele and Ronaldo room down the flanks. Now, there's a lot of talk about this change of formation, but I'm always funny about these conversations when it reacts to one defeat or two defeats where you throw everything out. I got you this far. And we are ahead of schedule, being 12th in the league and having 46 points with a few games to go. So I don't want to feel like I'm in danger of throwing all of that away just to change things because of a knee-jerk reaction.
All right, let's chuck the baby out with the bathwater, lads. The formation that's got us to 46 points, let's chuck that in the bin, rip it all up and start again because we lost 2 games. No, obviously I'm being a bit glib. I totally get like where these questions are coming from, right? Because look, we all do it, right? As fans, we all secretly think like, oh, I bet you if I got the job, I bet you I could do it. You know, how hard can it be? You just pick a formation, you just pick some players, win some games. And as I say, I'm not...
Drop some arrows on Footy Manager.
Yeah, exactly. You draw some arrows, you click through a few emails and that's it, you're a Premier League manager. I'm as guilty of it as anyone else, so I totally understand the instinct. And I can totally, if we were to have a conversation specifically about formations, right, you can put together some totally coherent arguments for shifting to a back 5 or whatever formation you might want to pick. Certainly, we've deployed a 5 at times this season in certain games or in certain periods of games where, Labris has felt that that's been the best way to get some points. So there's obviously a feeling within the squad and at the club that they're capable of doing that. And if they do change to that against Wolves, then there'll be a very good reason for it. We all know that whatever you might want to criticise Labris for, he doesn't underthink decisions, does he? He's always going to have thought through all the possible ramifications of any sort of change, whether it's big or small. But yeah, I just okay, the last 2 games have been bad. And again, as I say, I was more fuming than anyone on Friday night. But as Andrew said, as well, it's 2 games, you know what I mean? Before the last 2 games, I think we were off the back of 3 wins out of 4 or something like that. Certainly we'd won a good few games. We beat Spurs, we beat the Mags, we beat Leeds. We were in really tight games that we lost. Brighton in particular, that was, we weren't blown away there. So there is no need to panic. There's certainly cause for concern. There's certainly things that we need to improve and work on, but there's no reason at this point to start hitting the self-destruct button. especially with only a few games left. Like, even if we make some sort of sweeping change now, in 3 or 4 games time, it's obsolete anyway because it's the end of the season and we're going to have a new a new look squad by the time next season kicks off. And there's going to be speculation about players and coaches all summer. So we know it's not going to be the exact same group of people that start next season as end this one. So I don't personally see any massive value in that. I think you run the risk of confusing things more than you do fixing them with such a short turnaround between now and the end of the season. So I wouldn't be making any changes like that. And just to kind of tie off something Andrew was saying before, there are good teams in this league concede a lot of goals sometimes. A few seasons ago, Liverpool got beat 7-2. Man United got beat by Liverpool 7-0. Man United beat Spurs 6-1 or whatever it was a few seasons ago. Brighton, I think, was it a couple of seasons ago or last season, had sort of 2 games in a row where one game they got battered and the next game they battered somebody else. It can happen. Like the teams in the Premier League, particularly this season, I think more than any other in recent memory, those middle group of teams, which we're currently amongst, any of them are capable of having a day out where everything they touch goes in, nothing goes in against them. We had one of those days against Forest where everything they touch went in, and we decided to help them along a bit by going, well, here's another couple of chances, lads, get yourselves in amongst them. But that can happen, and it could just as easily be us doing it to Everton in a few weeks. It could be us doing it to Chelsea on the final day. So I don't think there's a need to start extrapolating too much out from this result or these 2 results to the rest of the season, because you could do that every few weeks through the season. And if you've won a couple of games, you'd be going, right, well, that's it. We're sorted. We're never going to lose again. That's the rest of football. We've completed that. Or you're in this position where you go, well, we've lost 2 games. That's it. Everyone's rubbish. Totally new team, new system, new coach. Get them all gone. I think, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think there's plenty of reason to stick with what's got us to this point, as you said, Chris.
Well, just looking at the 5 games before the Aston Villa game, we conceded 3 goals in 5 games. So, whether something suddenly snapped against Villa, who knows? But I'm sure we'll see in the coming weeks. I'm going to group another couple of questions to you, Andrew, and they're on a similar theme of kind of tactics and where people play. XCL asks, do you think Sunderland's attack is lacking, trying to play Enzo Lafay wide and putting Diarra central, and instead should be putting Enzo Lafay centrally and taking Diarra out for Talby? And then the next one is about Talby, because it says, is it from Joe Brown, is it finally time to let Talby start? Seems they like him as a finisher, but seems like he could play on the left and move Enzo Lafay in the middle. Now, there's a lot of talk about this, and it seems to be that at the moment Diarra is that question mark, because people seem to want to bring him out and put Enzo Lafay in and have Talby out wide. I do think it's one of those where next season, a lot of these players, and Jonny will get onto the transfer kind of news and all of that and what we think is going to happen as the summer starts. But we've got to remember all these players are going to be in their second season in the Premier League, and in theory, that should mean that they're improved versions of this season, aren't they?
You'd like to think so. And based on what we've seen so far, most of the players are progressing and getting better with more experience. It shows how peculiar this Forest game has been. And I think as well, this has been our heaviest defeat at home since the 50s. So there's bound to be people struggling with getting their head around it. But we've just lost 5-0, and there's questions about, is our attack needing to be freshened up? It just shows where we're at. And I think a lot of people are maybe just writing this Forest game off as a one-off and not necessarily thinking that the defence is now shot to pieces. It's a bit of a shame that we can't now look back at this season and say, well, nobody ever thumped us. That's usually the marker of a good side, particularly a side that's been promoted. It's nice to be able to say we were always in games. We never got an absolute beating off anyone. But yes, I do think up front there is room for a little bit of play there. We've mentioned earlier that the fact there's a couple of more natural wingers getting back to fitness is going to give us a bit of a boost. Yeah, in terms of Talby, I wouldn't mind seeing him getting a few more minutes because whenever he plays, he seems to produce something. Uh, he blows hot and cold still. I'm not saying he's the perfect dancer, and he does still have a lot to learn, I think. But I wouldn't be adverse to giving Talby a start against Wolves. You could maybe make the case that against Wolves, he's less likely to be needed in a defensive sense and can just concentrate on getting at them and making them panic. So, little bits of tweaks, and we're all saying it now, won't we, Chris? We're all wondering, can we get Enzo Lefebvre in the middle and just give him a little bit more freedom? I think we'd perhaps be wanting that, even if we hadn't lost 5-0 to Forest. Is that fair?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I do think there's this because I love Enzo Lefebvre when he's centrally, but he does wander. He has given the license to roam and get the ball in the middle. But I think part of the problem is we just haven't given him the ball enough, rather than where he's been on the pitch. I just don't think he's had enough of the ball. You saw when he went roaming against Villa and went looking for it, and he won it back, and did what he did straight away. So I don't know. Sometimes there's a mixed bag of, do we need to focus on where he is on the pitch, or do we just need to focus on getting him the ball? But to touch on something you mentioned earlier on, Jonny, I think, or it might have been Andrew, can't remember. Ryan Evans has said actually early in the season, if something wasn't working, Regis Lebris would change the tactics in the middle of a game. Example at Old Trafford. Lately, he seems to be more stubborn about doing that. Why do you think that is?
That is an interesting point, actually. I do think there's some truth to that. Old Trafford's probably the easiest example to point to, but I think there have been lots of games where even if it wasn't something as sweeping as changing the whole formation, there have been obvious tactical changes made during games that have made big impacts. I think of Everton at home. There were sort of almost two distinct periods in that game where we played like a different side. One of them we conceded, one of them we scored, which I think tells a bit of a story there. Look, we could go through quite a few examples, right? But the majority of them would be earlier in the season. And there's probably some of that is most likely down to Lebris himself kind of getting his feet under the table in the Premier League and starting to work out, okay, what is it actually like to manage in a Premier League game? Because you can be the brightest coach in the world and you can have all the brilliant tactical ideas and stuff, but particularly if you listen to people who've been there and done it and failed at Premier League level and tried to manage or tried to coach and been found wanting, and a common theme is a lot of them will say, it got to points in the game where I just looked across at the other bloke in the other dugout and thought, you're better than me. Like, you just know what to do. They'd be watching games and, the opposition would be making changes every 10, 15 minutes. And you'd be like, how do we even keep up? So I'm sure some of that is Lebris acclimatizing to this atmosphere in the Premier League, right? Because as much as it's higher pressure on the players, it's higher pressure on him as well. I wonder whether as well through the season as we've had periods of limited options, AFCON, post-AFCON when we had injuries that we were dealing with, and then Xhaka's absence, even he's not been back that long in terms of games played because of that 3-week break between Newcastle and Spurs. So some of it, I imagine, is down to, necessity as the season's worn on. Andrew mentioned before, and I said that it wasn't to blame for the Forest result, but it's certainly still true to say that we've got players in that team who've played a lot of games and a lot of minutes, some of them at quite a young age. So there's not the same flexibility and freedom in the squad that maybe there was earlier on, where we were more readily able to switch things mid-game. As I say, the injuries just haven't helped either. I think one of the things consistently that everyone said for a good few weeks now is out wide is probably one of the issues. Chris Riggs managed to mask that for a period when he was, he's played really, really well for that run of games, but he's an 18, 19-year-old central midfielder playing out of position on the wing in the Premier League. Like, you are eventually, that is going to tell in the performances one way or another. So to bring it back to Lebris and the changing systems during the game, like I say, I think some of it is probably that he was working himself out as much as the squad early on in the season and trying to see what he was able to do and how much impact he could have almost. And now he's maybe feeling the need to push the boundaries a bit less, allied with the fact that we've had injuries, we've had suspensions at points, we've had just general availability issues in the team. Yeah, I think we've maybe been a little bit more hamstrung second half of the season. But it's definitely it's an interesting observation. I think it's one that's worth keeping an eye on as we go into the start of next season, because I would imagine that a refreshed squad after a summer transfer window with probably some new faces in there to bolster the options, I would expect us to be more like the first half of the season Sunderland than the second half of the season Sunderland. So if that doesn't happen, then maybe we start looking into why, and seeing if there's a deeper issue there. But certainly nothing to particularly worry about for the minute. But yeah, definitely one of those things about Lebris that he's impossible to work out, isn't he? So why he's doing it, God only knows. But I think it's true to say that it's happening without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, just on that, the kind of whys and things, because I've had a couple of questions from Alan Davis and Joel Lewins around bringing in defensive coaches or set-piece coaches or new number 2 to register Briss. But Marley Hannon kind of sums it up with a question, and I'll put it to you, Andrew. It's, what is your genuine opinions on a coach change in the summer? I'm not saying or asking that he should be sacked, but do you see Kirill Louis-Dreyfus making that change to progress? I love Regis Lebris, but long-term his style isn't sustainable. And if he was to leave in the summer, it would protect his legacy. I'm not sure what, I mean, there was rumours, of course, the other week, but I'm not sure what your feelings are around that, Andrew.
I personally wouldn't be looking to change Lebris yet. I think he's shown more than enough to suggest he's capable of moving this club further. All these questions about why are we seeing fewer changes being made in games and what have you, it might just be a simple case of he's looking at the bench and doesn't fancy his options, and he would do things differently if he had a different type of player on the bench. I would be wanting to keep Lebris, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I know it's hard to tell into the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said to me, "Oh, Lebris is going to be your coach for the next 5 or 6 seasons." I think he's that good, and he's shown that much already. Do I see Louis-Dreyfus making a change? Possibly. That, however, is based on past examples of Louis-Dreyfus and how he's managed the club, rather than any fallout just from 1 or 2 odd games. If Louis-Dreyfus is to be making a switch, it won't be because of a bizarre night against Forest. It'll be because whoever he's identified to replace him, he thinks is a better fit for what he wants to do. I am a little bit worried that the Forest game, we do need to learn from it. But I am a little bit worried that we put too much stock in it, because we all started this season with plenty of people telling us, "Hey, Sunderland, get used to the fact that you're going to take a few scuddings this season. You're going to be getting beaten by sides who've been in the Premier League a lot longer than you, have spent a lot more money, and are a lot more ruthless and comfortable at this level." So rather than be too critical of the fact that we've finally been turned over, look at the fact that we've played so well so many times before that. And for me, Lebris is a huge part of that. And If Louis Dreyfus does pull the trigger, I would wait and see. I would give him the benefit of the doubt because he's made changes before and they've paid off. But it's not something I'd be pushing him to do or necessarily wanting him to do at the moment.
I just want to add something onto that as well, Andrew. You mentioned about the fact that, like, we're expected to take a few batterings this season, whatever, and you're spot on. We're essentially suffering from our own success, right? Because if you'd blind just told us all, the day after the playoff final, the classic cliche we keep saying, or on such and such a date, you're going to lose 5-0 at home, right? And you hadn't said who, hadn't said the context of the league, we'd have all gone, yeah, that probably sounds about right, to be fair. We'd have expected it. But then it's because, I was just doing the mental maths before there. By my count, in the 4 games that we've played against Arsenal and Man City this season, home and away, we conceded a grand total of 8 goals.
Yeah.
Whereas we've just conceded 9 goals in 2 games against Villa and Forest. And that's what makes it seem so much worse. Because, again, like I said before, we only judge them so harshly because we know what they're capable of. And you go, well, if you can only 8-4 against the best 2 teams in the country, 9-2 against 2, teams from the Midlands.
Aye, but you're right. You're dead right. But that's 2 teams in the Midlands who I think it's this week are competing.
Europa League semi-final.
Aye.
Exactly right, and this is the point, isn't it? Like you say, we do still need to take a step back at points and realize, it's not just names on paper. You know what I mean? It's not just, oh, well, it's Forest, so we should be beating them because we're at home or whatever.
Yeah.
There's some bloody good teams in this league, and the fact that we've done even better against some even better teams doesn't mean that we're not still liable for the odd, really poor result in much the same way as everyone is.
And no, you're dead right. And it was a poor result against Forest, of course, but it wasn't because we were outclassed. We've said a few times that we've given them a massive helping hand. So you can almost turn that into a positive and say, well, the chances of it happening again are slim if we get back to our strength. We do, listen, don't get us wrong, the Forest game was a shocker. I just think in the wider context, and as we're sat here now, we are 12th, which if we finish the season in 12th, I think that would be what? Our 4th or 5th highest finish since the 50s. So I mean, in the wider scheme of where the club has been and what it's done, to then look to consider changing the coach, you'd have to be a brave man, and you'd have to be confident that the person you're bringing in is of an even better standard to build on that.
Yeah. Well, having said that, it's still it's just coming up 4 years since we beat Wickham in that League One playoff final. And it's about to come up. I think it's about to come up 2 years exactly. I think it's next Monday when Sunderland got beat off Sheffield Wednesday at the end of the season under Mike Dodds when we finished 16th. And that was under it was pretty much exactly 2 years ago to the week or something like that. So again, when it shows how far we've come. But I'm going to put this because it's Andrew's favourite topic. I've got a couple on the fans. Paul Rackstraw says, was Friday the perfect example why there is no need to extend the stadium? 45 minutes of terrible football and there were hysterics and mass walkouts. Bloke behind me, who I'd never seen at the match before, was calling for Roofs to never play for us again. Too many part-time fair weather fans, Paul Rackstraw says. We've also got an email from Tom Boutflower who says, my question is in relation to this. Are we sadly running the risk of people thinking it's a failed season based on not getting into Europe? My opinion is that the goal was always to build in the second season and survival being all that was needed this year. And he said he witnessed fans coming to the bench just before halftime and abusing the coaches to the point where stewards and security staff were called to sit beside the dugout. And I know because of you tried to put all these people in room 101. So I'll let you go on this, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Chris. First of all, yeah, anybody going out of their way to abuse people, I just can't get my head round. Going out of their way to abuse the current staff is mind-boggling. I cannot understand that whatsoever. I do keep coming back to this point. I am not suggesting that it was a good showing against Forest. I understand the frustration, but yeah, to then have digs at people is just bizarre to me. I'm not going to criticize people who leave early in this instance, because this probably was a game where you think, this is done. In general, though, I do think we're at our best as fans when we do believe that till the end mantra and get behind the team and believe in them. I think in most cases that we need to hold that. The Forest game, though, was just it was a bizarre game. I can understand why some people thought, listen, it's a Friday night, it's a late night, I've been grafting all week, I'm going to get myself away. I can't understand the people who decide to stay and just grief the players. I just think, for me, that's the wrong option, and it's not something I would choose to do. It was a tough old week, though, for Sunderland fans. I mean, prior to the Forest game, we were looking forward to the match, but there'd been a couple of things knocking around that weren't exactly positive. There's been a lot of negativity around the season ticket renewals and dealings with the ticket office. There was the podcast with the acting chief executive, Tom Burwell, I think he's called.
Yeah.
Apologies, the name slipped my mind. He said some things which we all know are true, but we don't like hearing. We don't like hearing that the club need to get more commercial and need to try and do things differently, because we're seeing the club change in front of our eyes. To be in the Premier League, we are going to have to look after hospitality packages, and there are going to have to be seats at the stadium that are quite pricey. We don't like that because we like to think of Sunderland as a family club, but to be in the Premier League, you also need to make the most of tourist fans and all that type of thing. So there was, in the build up to the Forest game, there was a few things that might have made a few fans feel like, oh no, I'm losing my club again. Is that connection that we've built up starting to fade ever so slightly? And then on top of that, there's a heavy defeat. So yeah, for some people it was probably a bit much, and it was time to head home. All right. As for a failed season, I hope we don't end up like that, because yeah, as I said earlier, if we do finish 12th, or if we do finish in the top half, that's statistically one of the best seasons in Sunderland's post-war history. So for me, I hope people don't carry that sense into the summer, because that would be a real shame that the players and the staff and the hierarchy have worked wonders to turn us from a team who finished 4th and finished 1,000,000 points behind Burnley, 1,000,002 points behind Leeds, or whatever it was. Well, Burnley are already gone, so that points cushion hasn't done them much good. Leeds are probably safe, but not anywhere near as comfortable as us. So yeah, let's just remember this has been a fantastic year for us.
Yeah, the bizarre thing is, in terms of the psychology, if we had been bottom at Christmas and gone on a 10-game unbeaten run, and then we ended up on 46 points in 12th, everybody would be walking around with smiles on their faces thinking it was absolutely fantastic. Yet because it's the other way around and we've dropped off, people are glum about it. It's such a bizarre thing, the psychology of it.
Also, sorry, have we dropped off? We've lost 2 games in a row. That's, like I said before that, we won 3 really important, in particular the away derby. Like, that's an unbelievable result. I do take your point in terms of, like, first half of the season we were better, second half of the season we have not been the same level of team. But I just think, like, this is not a dig at you either, Chris. A lot of people are saying similar things, and I'm just a little bit like, well, a little bit of perspective. It's a bad week, a really bad week. Is it a drop off? I'm not so sure.
Well, you talk about drop off, Johnny. I'm talking about we lost 4 in the first 20, and we've lost 8 in the 14 games since.
Well, yeah, and this is. It is true to say that we were. Yeah, it is true to say that we were better. Oh, you're thin ice, you son.
I've got data to back it up, and you love your data. So I was
going to say this is why Johnny doesn't like stats.
Yeah, he's done us with numbers. No, but I think what I'm trying to say is, I prefer to frame it more as we overperformed in the first half of the season, and this is more of a usual standard rather than the first half of the season is where we quote unquote should be, and this is where we've dropped off. If you know what I mean, I think. It's less that we've dropped off and more that we've just returned to norm.
We have had so many seasons where we stunk the place out, and then, like you say, Chris, towards the end, we pull a run of results, and everybody's fine again. And it was rinse and repeat. It was a dangerous cycle.
Yeah, but it finished on an up. So the psychology of it's completely different. It works, rather than. And we've had a better season than if we were bottom at Christmas and won loads of games after. But it's just people don't kind of, it's the perspective thing. Well, we've had questions in from Gary Sinclair about players out of favour, Rob Lowe about who's coming through, and a brilliant one from Paul Brown, which I'm going to keep for another day in terms of their transfer links, which is fantastic. One from Michael Dunn about Wolves and building up to that, and team lineup predictions, which we'll have in the match preview. But I wanted to end on one from Callum. And this is on something Andrew mentioned. I'll start with you, Johnny. It's about that interview with the interim CEO. And it was on the Business of Sport podcast, which is of course, Charlie Methven's podcast. I have to admit, I am completely uneasy about the whole thing. Like, the fact that David Bruce, who did, a lot of pushing in terms of things specifically for Sunderland fans, has left the club, and there's not been much talk of that. I was disappointed about that. But then for the interim CEO, we never really hear from the upper echelons of Sunderland ownership, the board. He suddenly goes on a random, quite small scale business podcast and starts speaking about this and that and about Sunderland. Obviously, talking about how great Michael Ball is on the West End. Screwing up Kevin Ball's name. But he didn't need to do that. The things he was saying was all, to me, corporate speak, and he was saying the right things instead of, I know Sunderland fans and they will be thinking this, which kind of David Bruce said in actions, because we saw things change. I just felt so uneasy about the need for, especially the interim CEO, to do that, and especially to do it on a random business pod. I mean, speak to the fans. If he's got something to say, speak to us and do it on a platform that is directed at us, rather than a random podcast that few people might not even latch onto.
Yeah, I have some mixed feelings on it as well, I'll be honest. The first thing I'll say, mine, just to slightly defend him, is, of course, it's corporate speak. He's on a Business of Sport podcast. Like, he's speaking to the audience. They don't want to hear what Sunderland fans want to hear in plain English. I agree that he should be speaking to us.
I'd argue football isn't your average business.
Well, but that's a totally different conversation, isn't it? Like, that's a podcast for people who want football to be a business. So I agree with you that I'm uncomfortable he's on it in the first place, and I'm uncomfortable with the fact that he's not just communicating with the fans. To be honest, as an interim CEO, why is he doing anything public facing for Sunderland AFC? None of it really sits right with us, but just purely on the, like, it's all a load of LinkedIn guff, which it is, that's what it needs to be on one of them podcasts. So that's my defence out the way. I like I say, I totally agree with
he
you.
Just needed to reference his mate Jeff Linton, and then we would have had a full house.
But like, I agree with you. I think the principle of it's not great. There was something he said, and I wish I could remember the exact line now, but it's been a little while since I watched the clips. He said something about how he sort of basically didn't really fully get why the playoff final meant so much to us. And I thought, if you don't understand why the return to the Premier League in the fashion that it happened, in the manner that we did it, after so long away, and I don't need to say any of this to you or to any of the listeners, do I? Because everybody just gets it inherently. We all know why it was such a monumental occasion. For somebody with that much power at the club to openly admit that they didn't really understand it, that to me, not just a red flag, that to be like, and look, I know nothing about being a chief exec. This might shock you all to hear. So he could be the best guy in the world at his job. But to me, that should disqualify you from holding high office at this football club. If you look at that playoff final win and everything around it, and you come away thinking, they celebrated a bit much there, didn't they? You don't understand football, and you shouldn't be anywhere near it. And look, as I say, I can't talk about the specifics. I can't comment on the bloke's qualifications, but he might be amazing. He might prove us all wrong, and he might be brilliant. But I just don't see how you can be after that.
Well, yeah, I know where you're coming from. It felt a little bit tone deaf in part, and he did say some things which we don't like to hear, but are true. I'm sorry, as a Premier League club, we will have to put focus and attention into some of the mega bucks, foreign fans and what have you. I saw some of them at the Forest game. People who were coming out of the club shop with bags and bags and bags of merchandise, and that's fine. We need that. We can't turn away that money. But yeah, the whole direction of the club has been about bringing us closer to the more long-term fans. We don't want to lose that. Just one point I will make about him. He is interim, supposedly, but he is high up within Satori and Louis Dreyfus's wider portfolio, if that's the right word. So it might be that he's interim in this particular role at the moment. In the restructure, we might see him get a more permanent job title at Sunderland. And even if he doesn't formally work for Sunderland AFC, he is a bloke who's got the ear of the owners, so will be having an influence. So we do need to listen to what he's got to say, because it will have a bearing on where Sunderland go.
Yeah. Well, to me, and I know this resonates with you, Andrew, because you've said it a couple of times on various podcasts, whether it's with councillors or whoever, that the place Sunderland and the club is all about the people. And I think actually the brilliant podcast Gav did with the guy who did the Wall of Fame, the bricks, and the other day said it absolutely brilliant. And he mentioned Brian Clough saying he loved football, he loved being at Sunderland because of the people, and it's built around the people. And if you forget that atmosphere goes, you lose that connection, and there's no business left to run, because there's only a business because of the atmosphere, and that is because of the people and what the club stands for.
Yeah, very, very well said. Listen, Sunderland fans are smart. They know the crack. They know that the club will have a moving into a new era. We're not just a local shop anymore. You know, we're a big multinational business. But also Sunderland fans have got a fantastic bullshit-ometer.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're saying the wrong things and doing the wrong things, it won't be long before you lose goodwill.
Yeah, and that's it. Unfortunately, a season as brilliant as this season, we've had things like Legends Way recently, and we didn't get any questions in about any of the ticketing issues that have been going on, so we haven't been able to cover that. But we do know that there's been some serious issues with the club, and people have had huge problems with dealing with the club on that, which just shouldn't exist, because Without the fans, there's no club. The club disappears without the fans. The club are because of the fans and because of the people who support the club. But anyway, let's leave it there for today. So I'll just leave you to say thank you very much, Jonny, and thank you very much, Andrew. Much appreciated as always, gentlemen.
Pleasure all ours, mate. Pleasure all ours.
Yeah, exactly. And some important. I know that just as well. I agree, Jonny. If no, some good points and some important points made there. I think, yeah, we all want to see results on the pitch, but it's a club. There's other aspects, and it's right that we care about those aspects as well.
Yeah, I was just chuckling because the face Andrew pulled, it looked like he was going to disagree with Jonny that it was a pleasure.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
But anyway, thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more on the Roker Report website about everything we've talked about, I'm sure. And of course, we'll have loads on Haway the podcast as we build up to the Wolves game on Saturday. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.